This is how Steve Jobs built Apple different, and you should adopt his strategy. I'm Dr. Dan. I'm a neurostrategist and a coach. I teach leaders like you how to use storytelling to influence, persuade, and inspire your prospects. Well, speaking of story, this is one for the history books. Probably my favorite business story. Why? Because it has to do with arguably the best country in the history of mankind to date. Meaning they have generated more money today than many small countries. Apple is in a league of its own, and what's so fascinating to me is how it came to be. You've probably heard that video by Steve Jobs where he talks about here's to the crazy ones, the misfits,
the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes.
That was a message that he was calling out his perfect prospects. He was speaking to the internal problem that he knew the people that were going to buy his products were struggling with, this identity. And it's so amazing how he did it, more importantly, how he got to that place. Because for Steve, and here's how the story goes, he starts this company called Apple back in the 70s with a guy named Steve Wozniak. So they start building this company, they're gonna change the world with this new technology, and they wanna put a computer into every home. They have some decent success. They get to the early 80s, and Steve Jobs realizes they need a CEO to take them to the next level. Steve Jobs' next big product and passion within the company was a computer called Lisa. This was a $10,000 device. And Steve, in his analytical and articulate ways, creates a 9-page advertisement in the New York Times filled with features, benefits, and data about this computer. As you could probably imagine, it completely flops. And then after another flop of a computer and idea, Apple is a sinking ship. The CEO, John Sculley, talks to the board and says that Steve Jobs can no longer make decisions. Jobs protests, the board sides with Sculley, Jobs decides to step down, he goes to start another computer company called Next, then he gets affiliated with Pixar and gets a 51% ownership. Pixar had two major clients, NASA and the healthcare industry. They were more of a technology and data company than anything else. But then a guy who came along with Pixar named John Lasseter ends up inking a deal to do a commercial for Listerine. And this commercial was one of the first of its kind to use animated technology to create. But John gets the deal, makes an amazing commercial, and Listerine pays them. In that time, anything underneath Steve Jobs' dominion that was making money, he gave it full attention, and rightfully so, because his track record was not good in making money. His previous decisions had turned out not to be well. But he had a vision, and he was very obsessive. And so Steve has John double down on this animated technology. And lo and behold, as they start to develop this, Disney comes to them and says, we have a project called Toy Story. And Steve, in his obsessive ways, decided that I'm not gonna take your typical 6 months to build the story script. We're gonna take 2 years, and we're gonna make this the best movie and animated production in history. And so Steve Jobs surrounds himself with the greatest storytellers in the world. Well, lo and behold, that was a huge success. Steve Jobs makes his way back to Apple, but here's the kicker. When he goes back there, he decides we are going to focus on 2 things: being crystal clear with our messaging and focusing solely on our customer and their specific needs. So at that point, Steve knew the power of storytelling, and he knew that his audience, or the people that he wanted to buy his products, were these secret geniuses. They were unnoticed, unrecognized, underappreciated, but had something so brilliant inside them, they needed to get it out. And we are gonna provide them with platforms, devices, and technologies to take their secret genius to the world. The crazy ones, the misfits, the troublemakers, the rebels, the round pegs in square holes. This is who he's referring to. If you notice his previous ads, they didn't have computers in them. They were selling an identity, not a device. It was a story. And so the reason why I dig this so much is because I study the power of story. There was research, and they wanted to reveal the challenges of unwanted pregnancy so that women would change their belief and their behavior around it. One group, they showed a series of facts and data like a news station would. Here's the problems, here's what's wrong, here's the statistics, and here's why you need to be aware of this and change your behavior. In another group, they showed them an episode of the OC where a female, just like them, became pregnant. And the plight and the struggle and the challenge of this female, what she went through, this drama created through the storyline. Weeks later, they took a poll from these two audiences, these two groups of people. And group number 2, who watched the drama, who watched the story, who watched the OC, they remembered it more. They could recall the details. They felt as if they could be that person that had the unwanted pregnancy, and they changed their behavior. Where this group over here who watched the news, the stats, the data, the rational logic, they actually did what we call a rebound effect. They found reasons why they're not them. They don't make decisions like that. They're not promiscuous. They would never be put in that situation. And this went to show the power of story in actually captivating and moving a prospect or an audience to believe and behave differently was captured. And it was proven that a story does that unlike anything else. And it turns out Steve Jobs learned this the hard way. He failed the first time, went and studied the story, found out the power of story, surrounded himself with the best storytellers in the world, and came back and said, I'm going to build a company around this. That company has become the greatest company of all time. Simon Sinek, the author of a book called Start With Why, delivered a TED Talk years ago. It's one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. Go search The Golden Circle and you will see this 18-minute TED Talk that is transformative. And basically he said, people don't buy the what or the how you do things, they buy the why first. What's the motive behind why you do things? He said, it's not about doing business with everybody who needs what you have. It's about doing business with those who believe what you believe. And Steve Jobs made it his quest to put out what we believe as an organization. We just so happen to sell computers, but we're selling an identity. And it allowed that person inside who felt ill-equipped, felt alone and scared, it transformed them into someone who was confident, who was competent, who was surrounded by community and appreciated, and who was brave. And I'm telling you right now, that's what we call character transformation. That is what your story can do. And in 2008, I did this in my own business where my dad had heart surgery. I went back into my business that night and I just said the heck with it. I canned the scripts. I got in front of people and I told them who I was, why I did what I did, my path, my journey, my expertise, how I could help them. And I just described the emotion of why I believe they need to have what I have. They need to buy my service. It will change their life, not because I'm telling them, but because it changed my life. And that is what started my journey down creating an impact story formula. I've written about it in my book over and over and over again. And this is how to structure your story so that it displays your motives. So people know, like, and trust you like that because they feel you. And it creates this character transformation because they know the motive behind what you do is not to make more money or to have more power or success and fame, but to truly help them. You have a reason why you do what you do, and it's a good reason. And people need to know it, and your motive needs to come out. And when you do it through your story, they make their own decision on their own volition why they're going to choose you, why they'll pay premium prices, why they'll follow through and tell others. And this is what is displayed with Apple. Why do people wait in line when they already have an iPhone in their hands? Because Apple's not selling devices, they're selling an identity. And they do that through the power of story. Steve Jobs knew exactly how to do this. And what's super fascinating about the story is that 9-page ad that he tried to sell that $10,000 computer with turned into 2 words: think different.